Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much for coming. My name is Brie Lindsey, and I'm a Senior Program Associate at the California Council on Science and Technology. CCST is a nonpartisan, nonprofit organization that was established in 1988 at the request of the California legislature and is dedicated to providing impartial expertise that extends beyond the resources or perspective of any single institution. So I want to thank you for joining us today at what is our third in a new series of CCST expert briefings that we've been presenting at the Capitol for the last couple of months, including our most recent ones, which were on hepatitis A and underground gas storage. In addition to these briefings, we want to let everybody know that we are, Flash just blinded me. Wanted to let everybody know that we are here to bring science to your service, and so we offer everything from briefings, workshops, to just chats with an expert if you have a question, anybody we can put you in contact with, and then we also offer short and full-length reports. So we have a really great treat for you today as part of our 30th anniversary Science and Technology Week slate of events, which includes a reception tonight that all of you are invited to. We have 5 experts with us, well, one's in the back of the room, who will give us some insight into how making is being brought to the students of California, ranging from a large engineering-based makerspace at UC Berkeley to a concerted effort across the CSUs and to a growing statewide network of community college-based makerspaces. So this statewide network is the realization of a vision from our co-host, Ton-Quinlivan, who put into motion just a couple short years ago what is now called the CCC Maker Initiative, which Carol will be talking about a little bit later. Can you speak to us a little bit about that?
Absolutely. I wanted to say hello. I'm Ton-Quinlivan, Executive Vice Chancellor of Workforce and Digital Futures of the 114 California community colleges, and thank you for being with us today. On behalf of my system, but also as a board member of CCST, delighted to have you here to hear from our speakers. Just a quick comment. CCST played a pivotal role in our ability to have the capacity to start up our CCC Maker initiative. We were able to do this venture and put a $17 million investment in it because CCST researched and did the original white paper on how to connect the community colleges into the maker movement. And we saw it as being at the frontier of a learning environment where students can develop transferable skills, the 4 C's: critical thinking, creativity, communication, collaboration, and a sprinkle of entrepreneurship. And in an article just a few months ago, it's a national article, that covered what was going on at colleges and universities. There was an article that featured the maker movement, and in it the 3 sets of institutions were mentioned. The first was Yale University, the second was UC Berkeley, and third were the California community colleges. Yay! So our appreciation to CCST for helping us pave the path into this area and be supportive of STEM and all things STEM. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Vice Chancellor. So just really quickly, how many of you have heard of makerspaces? So that's good, at least some people have heard of it, but there are people who didn't raise their hands. So I'll just really briefly talk about the maker movement and hopefully can fill in. The maker movement is basically just linked to the DIY movement of the 1950s, which is, it's a growing group of people who are committed to open exploration, intrinsic interest, and creative ideas, and a lot of times just hands-on working with projects. A lot of this happens in a makerspace, which has a lot of different definitions, but can be thought of as any community space where there are shared tools and ideas and groups of people gather to create things for either useful or playful ends. And these can be digital things or they can be physical artifacts. And makerspaces can range anywhere in their focus from low-tech to high-tech, have just focusing only on fabric arts, for instance, or all the way over to robotics. Any mixture of these can be expressed through a makerspace. There are a lot of different names and models. There are makerspaces, hackerspaces, fab labs, lots of different ways to collect people together. There are makerspaces in a growing number of universities and colleges because learning through making is presenting a different way of learning that is thought to emphasize self-directed learning and building on 21st century skills like Fawn mentioned. So communication, critical thinking, collaboration, creativity, which are things that students are going to need to move into the new jobs that we're seeing come online. There are a lot of different ways of assessing students through these makerspaces, but one of the exciting things about the makerspace, the maker movement in universities, academic settings, and colleges is that they have the potential to engage a diverse group of students in the STEM and STEAM fields and providing on-demand and in-demand skills for innovative workforce and changing job needs. So today we have representatives from California colleges and universities just to give you an idea of how California is bringing making to its students. First, we have Dr. Björn Hartmann, and he is the director of the Jacobs Institute for Design Innovation. He's also a professor of electrical engineering and computer sciences at UC Berkeley. And he is not only the director of the Jacobs Institute, but also co-founded the Citrus Invention Lab, which is a lab that's equipped with a lot of digital fabrication and rapid prototyping tools. So I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you very much for the introduction. So, as we mentioned, I'm the faculty director at the Jacobs Institute for Design Innovation, which is our newest teaching institute on campus at UC Berkeley. We're a product of the College of Engineering, but we're explicitly open to students from all across the university. This is our home, opened in 2015, Jacobs Hall. And our institute supports students in learning the design process, human-centered design process, that lets them tackle wicked problems. So these are problems that are not easily solved, but they're complex problems. And they do that by first going through a design process to understand and define unmet needs in the world around them. So here you see groups of bioengineering students who over the summer go to local hospitals to talk with practitioners and nurses to identify opportunities where new technologies could help in the delivery of care. The students in our institute prototype and test solutions, and they do that through a wide variety of spaces in which they can meet as teams, they can design, innovate, and then also make, taking up their ideas from a concept into practice. And a big impetus for us to invest in this area actually came from our industrial advisory board, which in particular, Paul Jacobs, the former CEO of Qualcomm, and our dean at the Clinton Global Initiative meeting, launched the institute by saying, today is not enough to provide future engineering leaders with technical skills. That is what universities like UC Berkeley already excel at, but it is not enough. Our students must also learn to work in interdisciplinary teams. They must learn about the design process, how to prototype and iterate rapidly, and how to manufacture sustainably, combine art and engineering, and realize that all of this now happens in a global context. So that is the mission statement for our institute. Now, we operate the largest academic makerspace on UC Berkeley's campus, and I thought it might be useful to just set a framework of what academic makerspaces can do. And here I'm relying on a framework from Martin Culpepper at MIT. And he describes that there are basically three types of makerspaces. At the extremes, they only fulfill one of these functions. But many of the spaces we now see emerging actually mix these different functions. So the three different functions are machine shops, project spaces, and community spaces. Let me tell you about each one in a little bit more detail. Machine shops we've had on campus, on many campuses for a long time. And they specialize in training and mentoring students in the creation of really complex or very fine detailed components. And that usually means this requires interaction with skilled machinists, and they focus on the complexity of what can be built, and that usually means being able to serve only a small number of students. For example, only those enrolled in a mechanical engineering degree program. Project spaces allow students that work in teams to succeed on their class projects. So project spaces are tightly tied to a curriculum, to courses in which students are asked to work together on open-ended projects. And so 8 years ago at UC Berkeley, we experimented with a space called the Cal Design Lab, which was housed in the College of Environmental Design and Architecture, but brought architecture, the arts and sciences, and engineering together. And then finally, community spaces are spaces that prioritize fostering unrestricted making in a community effort. So this means they're open to students who are not enrolled in particular courses. And you don't necessarily have to be a member of, enrolled in a particular degree program. These community spaces tend to be open to the entire student body. And so here is just a quick time lapse of what 5 or 6 years ago the Citrus Invention Lab looked like, which was a community makerspace that I helped found. Now, from our perspective, the right combination in an academic makerspace is actually to have aspects of all of these. So, you want some aspects of a machine shop, namely digital and physical making tools. And I'll describe to you what that looks like at UC Berkeley, and we think of it as giving students the resources of a 21st century workshop. Second, it is very useful for these spaces to also find integration points with existing curriculum. So the spaces should find a way of supporting design and team-based courses. But third, it is, I think, one of the greatest strengths of our current space at UC Berkeley that there are serendipitous connections between students who are just working on extracurricular projects, on maybe art installations, and researchers who work on PhD level research, and they all intersect in the same space. So for us, that space is Jacob Saul. We have 3.5 floors right on the edge of campus. And just to give you a quick overview of the floor plan, our entire first floor is an all-purpose makerspace that is open to anyone on campus who registers for the space and does the appropriate safety training. And then stacked on top of that, we have a couple of design studios where students can take those project-oriented classes, and they may go directly from that teaching studio downstairs into the makerspace. So here's just another shot of our first floor makerspace, and the way I think of what this space provides is a 21st century workshop. So if you think about the great workshops that have led to transformative industries in California, you think of Hewlett and Packard, right? The garage in Palo Alto that gave rise to much of our information technology economy. So to me, the 21st century workshop has 3 main components. It's powerful design software coupled with digital fabrication tools that allow you to take software plans and turn them into physical artifacts, combined with programmable electronics, because everything is smart these days. You can embed computing and intelligence in every product, in every service, in every infrastructure project. So design software enables students to create detailed plans and specifications, how their creation should look like and work like. And so that is software like Mechanical CAD to define the physical shape and mechanisms, Electrical CAD to define circuits, and code to author the logic, the behavior. Digital fabrication equipment are basically tools that have come down the pipeline from industrial manufacturing, and they have shrunk in price and have increased in availability so that now university labs can afford to purchase them and make them available to students at large. So what before might have been $1 million CNC machines now has been shrunken down to desktop fabrication, where you can get some of the same processes at the price of thousands of dollars. Now, of course, there are some limitations, right? Those tools are smaller, they're not as capable, but they offer students the possibility to take their ideas and turn them into physical forms. So, for example, in Jacobs Hall, we offer a bank of a dozen 3D printers that allow you to feed a software CAD model into them, and a couple hours later, you can then come out with a complex 3D artifact, such as this mathematical sculpture. Now, embedded electronics to me are the third core component, and that is the realization that, some decades ago we had the personal computing revolution, where what before was only accessible to experts in government labs and big corporations, mainframe computing, we now can have on our desks and in our pockets. But that trend has actually continued, and so now we can run code, we can run software for about 10 cents or a quarter in a small electronic chip that you put inside of a product. And so literally all of the products that get designed in Silicon Valley these days have that intelligence built in. So just think of the kinds of flagship products that have come out of California recently. Right? The Nest programmable thermostat is a physical shape, it has a small computer in it, and it controls the temperature of your house. The Tesla, electric vehicle, but also really a computer on wheels. And if you look at large infrastructure, such as GE that opened a big design center in San Ramon, once again, it's the intersection of physical products, electronics, and software. And so we see that as really a very important area for our students to understand, that all of these areas that right now are separate degree programs actually intersect. And so we try to cover that education in Jacobs Hall. Now let me just quickly set the larger academic context. I think makerspaces are very good at teaching students the design process, also user needs and benefits analysis. What should we build? What is worthwhile building? And the hands-on prototyping. And most of these projects happens in teams and focus on emerging technologies. And on the other hand, many campuses also are building entrepreneurship programs to equip students with those skills. And entrepreneurship programs focus more on the value creation and on thinking about how to operate within business networks. But both makerspaces and entrepreneurship spaces really focus on supporting teams working with technology. And so here's just another view of, to me, the local ecosystem that makerspaces connect to. So they connect to entrepreneurship, but they also connect to leadership programs. They connect to social impact programs because students create projects that aim to have social impact. And because there's code and electronics involved, these projects also often connect to data science, because the projects that students build either consume data or they generate data about the world. So a couple of words on the scale of our makerspace at UC Berkeley. Each semester we host about 20 courses from about 10 different departments on campus, and we reach about 1,200 students a semester just with courses. And I just saw the numbers today. We just passed for the first semester 1,000 students enrolled per semester to work in the makerspace on prototypes. And I think what we can deliver is that there are kind of two different target audiences. I think so I'm an avid skier, and so, excuse the mountain metaphor, we try to reach as many students as possible at a base camp level of exposure. Here is what making is about. Here's what the design process is about. And then a smaller set of students would basically live in the makerspace if we let them. And those students take every single course, build a new project every single semester, and they really get to that peak of expertise where they will be the future leaders in product design, product management, and innovation. At Berkeley, we think of our institute as having 3 pillars. There's a curricular piece where we host classes from existing departments, but we also create new classes that haven't existed before. And then, at least as important, is that co-curricular piece, where it's really students taking the initiative. Students creating student clubs around 3D printing, around assistive technologies to help people with disabilities. And that is the flagship program there is our Makerspace program, the Maker Pass, where anyone can sign up to use the facilities. And then we also do a series of public talks and events. And what we found through the 3 years that we've been in operation now is that there's really a need for a new curriculum at the undergraduate level, starting right at the freshman level, to supplement the existing strengths in science and engineering. And for us, that is an introduction to the wide world of different design disciplines, and then core skills such as design methodology, visual communication, prototyping, and fabrication that the students can then take into their majors, into the design courses in their disciplines. And then after they take the design courses in their discipline, we think it's very important to bring students from different disciplines back together and teach interdisciplinary capstone courses that bring arts and sciences, humanities students in contact with engineers, that bring different engineering disciplines that normally live in isolation together to think holistically how to address complex challenges. So I just want to show you a couple of example projects that have come out of the courses and the Makerspace in Jacobsville. Now we probably all still remember up until last season, we had 4 or 5 years of very little rain, and we were in a drought situation in California. So monitoring how much water we use became very important and will likely become important again in the very near future. So here is a fixture-level water flow meter that students designed. It's a box that you put right between the water pipe and your fixture, and you don't plug it into the wall because you don't want to have wall power anywhere near water. So inside that little box is a 3D printed impeller that spins when water rushes through it. It has magnets on the periphery. Those magnets induce a current in a copper spool around it that generates enough electricity to run a small computer chip that measures how fast that water is flowing and sends it wirelessly to your phone or your tablet. Energy saving, another very important topic. So 40%, I believe, of the energy in commercial buildings is used for just heating and cooling them. And so we're heating and cooling massive amounts of air when we're actually only occupying a small area of a building. So here a student group thought about creating a personal environmental control system by having heating and cooling elements built directly into the chair. So in the middle you see a thermal imaging camera that shows you the heat profile now of having just your chair and your environment heated. And once again, that is all controllable through a smartphone application. Big important industry in Northern California is winemaking. This is a device that a group of students designed after interviewing winemakers about the challenges they face. And one of the challenges they face is when fermentation goes awry. And if they don't capture early enough that a fermentation process goes awry, you have to flush thousands of dollars of liquid down the drain. And so this is a spike that measures the degrees Brix, the remaining sugar content, in a fermentation tank. And when that ever diverges from what should be happening, then the vintner gets a text message on their phone so they can quickly return to the tank and adjust the right mix of ingredients. Just show you 2 or 3 more and then conclude. Medical technologies. There's a huge promise of future innovations in the medical field. Here's a device for people with sensory ataxia who lose a sensory sensation in their feet. And once you lose the sensation in your feet, the risk of falls becomes much greater. Now, some physicians at UCSF had an idea to say, well, if the nerve endings in your feet don't work anymore, what about the nerve endings on your back? So they came up with the idea and gave it to engineers at UC Berkeley in a course, who then built this pressure sensing insole that senses your footfall whenever your feet hit the ground and wirelessly relay that to cell phone vibration motors that you just put on your back. And so now whenever you walk, you get a little buzz on one side of your body or the other. And initial experiments have shown that patients are able to integrate that sensory information and become more steady in their gait again. So maybe I'll leave it at those couple of project overviews. We have a lot of information, including publicly available safety training on our website. And I also just want to point out that UC Berkeley, along with other universities, is now organizing annual conferences where faculty and staff that work in academic makerspaces come and meet. And the very next conference will be August 3rd to 5th, right on Stanford's campus, and will be co-organized by Stanford and UC Berkeley. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for providing all of those examples and showing us what you are up to in your space and what you're doing at UC Berkeley. So while we're switching over computers, I'll introduce our next speaker, who is Dr. Carlos Ayala, who is the Dean of School of Education. Thank you.
The cable came off. Yeah, why don't you plug it back in?
If that's not working, maybe we can use your computer, and we have his presentation on the stick. So if you guys wouldn't mind sharing.
Yep.
Thank you, Björn. All right, I'll continue introducing you.
Okay, that's great.
So Dr. Ayala is the Dean of the School of Education and Professor in the Department of Curriculum Studies and Secondary Education at Sonoma State University. He's been instrumental in setting up the Maker Certificate Program, which is a first of its kind program, and he is working to expand that through the CSUs.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and get started.
Got it.
There we go.
Thank you.
Fantastic.
Thank you for your patience.
You don't mind if I do it? It's easier for me. Okay, let's switch back. Thank you. Thank you for this opportunity. I'm very appreciative of the chance to talk about the work that we're doing. We're very excited about it. So I'm a dean, a former faculty member, former science teacher, former chemist. My first job was working in a wood shop teaching chemistry to high school students in Calexico, California. And that's where I kind of got the flavor of making, but I didn't know what it was then, and now I know. And now I'm just driven to try to get this embedded across our entire state. As we heard from Björn, we are a nation of makers, right? When we think about Benjamin Franklin or Ida Wells, we think about all of these people who've created things, have made things, innovated things, and used them to move us forward. And we are in a space now where we heard earlier about how technology is becoming more accessible. Techniques and way to learn to use this technology is becoming more accessible for everyone. And there are different ways that modeling and prototyping can be funded, that we are on the brink of something really big. And the CSUs and our colleagues want to be a part of that, and we're beginning to do this, and we want to unleash it more, and we're taking big steps already. So what we are trying to do is that we're trying to implement these kinds of things. We're in the process of developing our vision as a system. We're thinking about the direction that we are going to be moving towards. But these are some of the big things that we think about, right? We saw some of those examples from my colleague here about statewide, innovation on civic and scientific problems. We want to spread that. We want to create maker spaces across the entire state, right? From Weed, California, all the way to Calexico, from Chico to San Diego. We want to see these spaces there. We want to use these spaces for P16 learning. We know that in early childhood, students can learn to build things and use their hands to do something. What is it going to look like if a student has that exposure in their preschool, and then in their elementary school, then in their middle and high school, and then they end up at UC Berkeley? What are the things that Björn's going to have in place to make that happen? And we know that students can learn STEM content in makerspaces. So last year at the Maker convening that Maker Ed put together, one of the projects from Sonoma State showed some data that demonstrated that students in an elementary school who learned mathematics in a Maker project-based learning approach outperformed students on the Smarter Balance tests. And that is huge, right? Because a lot of these studies focus on tests that are very close to the curriculum, that are designed by the curriculum people. But the Smarter Balance, that's the gold standard in the state of California. And so we know that there's potential there, and we're trying to unleash that. We are going to unleash it because we're going to prepare legions of teachers, P16, to go out into the fields to do these things. Right? California, the CSU, prepares half the teachers in the state. Half the teachers in the state. 10% of the teachers in the whole nation. And 15% of the STEM teachers in the whole nation. We have some leverage. We see high schoolers, community college students, four-year university students with these ideas, with these opportunities, transforming California. And we've already taken a lot of steps to move us forward. So we are on an initiative now to have maker spaces on every campus. You'll hear from my colleague, Dr. Jeremy Qualls, a physicist. He'll talk about the makerspace on campus through support from the Chevron Corporation and other philanthropic funds. We'll be starting a makerspace at the Monterey Bay campus, and we're going to be hosting at the end of May a maker convening where we're going to bring all of the CSUs together to inventory what we're doing and do some other kinds of things. I'll talk about that more a little bit better. We're also conducting research on the best practices, and we've already given about 8,000 STEM teachers from across the state exposure to makerspaces at the STEM symposiums that occur on a regular basis. And we continue to practice that. One of the important things about making is this idea about sharing, about being able to make connections with other people and do it in a collaborative kind of way. We're calling that the partnership ethos, and that's the kind of model that we're trying to follow, and I'll tell a little bit more about how that plays out. I'll also talk about the Maker Certificate Program, but these are the things that we're already moving on. So why libraries? So we're actually picking libraries because libraries are very welcoming places on campus. They're open long hours. They already have infrastructures in place on how to support the staffing in using students for staffing. I'd be interested in finding out how you struggle with that, because all of us are trying to figure out the right way to do this. We know that the libraries are a place that's neutral. I'm really glad to hear that you have multiple departments working in your space, but that's not the case across the system, right? There's a lot of doors when that faculty member leaves, locks it up, and leaves those the 3D printers sitting there. So, you know, we're trying to promote the libraries as that particular space. And at the CSU level, this is where we're championing this. Like I said, Monterey Bay and San Diego State will both have spaces based on this initiative, hopefully next year. Also at Sonoma State, we have something called the Maker Certificate Program. This is the picture, right? Every teacher leaving the CSU system will have exposure to the maker spaces. That kind of base camp exposure that you were talking about, that idea, giving everyone that kind of access. I just found out on our trip up here today that the students in our liberal studies program that feed into our elementary education program at Sonoma State, they're going to have a complete maker class that they're going to be expected to go through. So these students are already getting this base camp kind of exposure. This Maker Certificate Program is that peak experience. It's a 3-course module that we offer at Sonoma State where we ask teachers and librarians and community college folks and four-year university folks to come to learn about makerspaces, to learn about the pedagogies of makerspaces. Then we give them a bright, shiny certificate that they can take home with them. And we're trying to spread that model. We have about 400 people who completed this program, and we now have, and this is a partnership that we have with the County Office of Education, this sharing partnership I was talking about. So we collaborate with our local county office to do this, and now we've asked other CSUs, we've asked other county offices to join us. So now we have San Mateo County Office of Education. They're launching their Maker Certificate Program in combination with ours. They're going to start creating their own classes. They're following our model, and we say, go, do this, right? Because we want to spread this across the system. And through donations that we get from different places, we offer scholarships to people to be able to do this. We're very excited about this program. Every teacher produced in the CSU exposure in makerspaces, and then some with these peak experiences. That's going to be transformative. Finally, we're going to be hosting a convening for the CSU. Interestingly, we don't know what's happening in all the different campuses. We don't know all the different makerspaces. We don't know all the initiatives that are happening across the system. And as we begin to expand this, more people keep on popping up. So what we're going to do is we're going to invite people to campus, and we're going to find out what's going on and do inventory things. We're going to share best practices. We hope to craft a manual that we could give over the course of the next year to future makerspaces so that they can start developing these and creating these. And we're going to come up with some strategic goals. Yeah, and the CSU is a really great place to do this. Because we've got a lot of resources that are available to us to do that. That's all I have to say. I don't have all the big pictures. Hopefully Jeremy does. My questions are at the end. Okay.
Thank you so much for that overview. Maybe we can just pass the computer down since the cable will go that way. Thank you. So next we'll have Dr. Jeremy Qualls, who we've got a little bit of an introduction already from Dr. Ayala. But another thing to mention is that he recently designed and built the Sonoma State Makerspace and is currently researching the impact of makerspaces and an associated undergraduate level maker class on students' learning gains. And choice of major?
Yep.
To choice of major.
All right, well, thanks for having me here. So this is our makerspace. It's about 2,000 square foot. It's inside an old media storage. We renovated the library. We have strong partnership with the library, and they dedicated an unused space, reclaimed it, did some renovation with the flooring and electrical, and now we have a very nice 2,000 square foot showcase and heavily used space. And so I want to talk a little bit about this. So for about 2 years now, I've been working intensively on how to integrate the curriculum into an effectively used makerspace and what would be the trends that we're seeing. And so I have a course on making, and which we assess how the students change. And some of the areas that we see is that we're giving them an ability to deal with failure, and so they fail a lot. And they're encouraged to keep going. Things go wrong all the time. And so this is an open forum to allow them to deal with failure. It also gives them confidence to deal with real-world problems. When things break or something goes wrong, instead of going to YouTube what the solution is, right, how do I fix this? They think, oh, I can be able to fix this myself, and then they have the confidence just to fix it themselves. And so that's nice. And creativity has changed. So if I ask my students, are you creative? A lot of them will say, maybe. How do you define creativity? And so then as I go through that, what that really means to them is they like to engage in independent work, but if you ask them to create something useful, they'll say, I'm not creative. Come up with a real solution, come up with something that works, and they'll say, well, in that case, I'm not creative at all. And so I found that many of our students don't have the social skills that are necessary to do partner work. And then my students here are not specific to any discipline. This is all disciplines that are pulled together here. It's not just science and tech, although that's where I'm from. So they also have poor time management skills and little real-world experience, and even having trouble with scissors and drawing circles. And so you say, wow, that doesn't make sense, but it's true. Okay. It's just a change in times. Okay, so what we notice is that what does it look like from the CSU point of view? Well, their urban maker spaces are usually pay-to-play kind of deal. They're local, and some of the cities define that. We have some small maker spaces, maybe a couple of 3D printers or something like that, in the public libraries. And we're starting to see some of the CSUs are getting makerspaces, although they're not uniform. So every campus defines what their makerspace will look like and be equipped with. So some of the common things that we like to do is what you've seen before, so I won't put too much on this one. However, we want to emphasize the breadth. So instead of having one specialty, we want a one-shop-fits-all where they can do arts and crafts in that space. They have access to sewing machines, digital embroidery. We even have a 3D chocolate printer. Anything that we can get people in that space and engaged and creative. So what maker pedagogy, which I'm really focusing on, and then assessing that, how it works, looks different across the age categories. So for K through 12, you do a lot of activities. You do a lot of cardboard monsters. You do automatons. You do birthday cards that light up when you open them. You have lots of different things like that. As you advance into high school, it starts to become more exploratory, project-based. Here's something you need to build, more technical. Post-high school, which is in our area, the maker spaces have a lot of variance from a $10,000 budget to several millions, right? Depends on what you're doing. It's very tech and science heavy, and the expectations are self-imposed to be higher, so students feel like they should make something grand, which is something we have to overcome. But overall, it's the open-ended nature that the students aren't used to, and that's what you see at the post-high school. It's freedom. And most students can't deal with freedom, which is strange. So there's some assessment that's already gone on, especially some of the libraries. And so within the last 2 years, publications have started to come out, but this is still an emerging field. One thing that I want to reflect on right quick is if you look at the common sense census that come out between 0 to 8 of age, the total daily time is about 2 hours a day on a screen, media screen. And then if you look at adults, it's about 9 to 12 hours a day adults spend looking at a screen or in digital interaction right now. We're in an information age, and so that reflects in the maker pedagogy because we have access to these huge digital libraries, and that brings out where we're fighting at. So you have the ease of digital libraries, so you can just download and just make anything, right? Like Thingiverse is a website that's dedicated to a digital library of models. You can just select that and then just print it. But that's not creativity, right? So what it is it's a fight of availability to free thought. So that's one of the ones you have to do the fine line through. Virtual reality, virtual systems, virtual reality versus real. So you can go into a VR system, you can design a model. In fact, you can have a clay system. It looks like clay, you can build and pull it, and then you can print it. Or you can do the same thing but with the physical hands. So it's a fight between those two things. Where do we go at? Group work, building those social skills from group work as opposed to independent, in-depth, my personal skills. Where do you draw the line? On all of these, you can go the extremes one way or other. And so where do you get the highest impacts? And I think it's in the makerspace that really looks at each of these and picks out pedagogically, how do you maximize, where's that sweet spot to get the highest learning? So most of the support that I have comes from the National Science Foundation, which I'm very thankful for this support. We got $585,000 to develop a makerspace and assess pedagogy and advancements and what's the effectiveness of teaching and having multiple disciplines in there. As a note, NSF has many pushes for making and defining it in a number of ways. They've even had an eager grant that came out in 2016 that was just dedicated to funding makerspaces. So we went within, as my colleague was saying, the library is a sanctuary space. It shares neutrally. We went with it mainly because of the ideal of sharing across the campus. And so I work with my dean, Dean Linstoffer in the School of Science and Ed, and Dean Karen Schneider in the library to put this. And then I also work with Carlos, and we've created this space in the library. And then we have a course. It's a sophomore level course to address the sophomore year slump and also introduce students from the STEM majors into the potentials of using the makerspace. And we do it in the context of social awareness and picking problems, and then we work with community partners to work on their problems and create solutions in the space. And so this has been a very big hit. We have assessment, we do a number of tools, we have satisfaction surveys, basically confidence survey, we do interviews, we do a pre and post survey in the form of problem solving. In this case, you're mentoring a 7th grade student and you have these items and you need to build something. How would you help instruct her? How would you go about that? And so we'll have a pre and post, and we've already shown that not only are the technical skills increasing, but how they would communicate. So now after going through the class, they recognize I may want to talk to this student in a different way to convey the thoughts to them. So that's a social awareness that we're pretty good coming through. So I'm very pleased and excited for the future. I'm pleased with what we've done here and excited about the future. I think maker spaces open up doors that information age is closing on us very quickly. And it opens up, I think, even at some point we'll start questioning how much of our humanity do we lose due to the information age. And with the Internet of Things and so everything digital accessible, the hands-on approach of a makerspace, I think, is one of the answers. It's the hope that's in the Pandora's box of the information age. And so I think some future challenges included for us, getting accessibility across California. I'd like to have everyone have a place that I had when I was a kid growing up, the garage, that place where I can go and try and break things and then don't tell anybody about it at home, right? So anyway, we still need advanced assessment and get it out. I feel that this will be established as a high impact practice. When the data fully comes out, and then we're just looking for more ways to partner up and to develop curriculum.
Thank you so much for sharing with us. I think it's really cool that you're able to trace how students are changing in just one semester in your makerspace. That's really exciting. Next, we're going to have Carol Pepper-Kittredge, who is the statewide project director for CCC Maker, which is an initiative that was funded by the California Community College Chancellor's Office Workforce and Economic Development Division. She's also the Associate Dean of Workforce Innovation at Sierra College, where she's worked to build 2 public-private partner maker spaces on the campus. Thank you.
All right, so this is a pretty amazing project. Thanks to the Vice Chancellor, this is the first community college statewide initiative in the country. We're really looking to have maker spaces launched at community colleges. So it's really, it's a heady project, but we're really having a lot of fun experimenting with it. And I wanted to start out with a slide of the statewide advisory committee on the front. So our first meeting we had was at Maker Media with Dale Doherty, who's the CEO of Make Magazine and the grandfather of the Maker Fair. And it was really important for us to have Dale involved in this initiative. He actually said he'd been wanting to get involved with the community colleges for quite some time, because Dale is all about the democratization of making, and every child a maker, every human a maker. And in the community college world, we view everyone as a lifelong learner, and the accessibility that we offer within the state to all students is really significant. So Dale's vision of everyone a maker, everyone a learner, and then this open source ethos of sharing and building community was exceptionally important. So Ton-Quinlivan's vision was to bring this under an innovation portfolio under the Doing What Matters for Jobs in the Economy under the Chancellor's office. It's a 3-year funded project, so a pretty quick turnaround, and it's funded at $17 million. The Sierra College is the fiscal, and we partnered with Pasadena City College to provide technical assistance out in the field. And then we also have special service providers, people with expertise in things like entrepreneurship. So we're working with Kiva in Oakland. We're working with Hacker Lab in Sacramento to help us on the badging expertise. So we wanted to bring in expertise from the field, but also to bring those resources into the colleges as well as fund the colleges with their work. And I think Vaughn and everybody have really kind of covered this pretty well, but why are we doing this? There's a whole lot of middle skills out there that are really going unfilled right now. How are we going to fill those middle skill jobs? How do we fill those occupations when they're changing so rapidly? When things like autonomous vehicles completely change industries. And so the makerspaces, we think, are a way to really address those really transformational shifts through our system and in partnership with the makerspaces. So we've talked a lot about what a makerspace is, but it's really just a place for technology to come together with community. When we first started our initiative, we said, if we do anything with this, it's got to be about community. If it turns into a room with tools, we've completely failed. So we really emphasize the building of community with our partner colleges, and the last thing on the list was to develop the room of tools. And there's a lot of different models. So right now we have 24 funded colleges, and everyone is different, unique to their own community. So there's some that are purely academic. College of the Canyons is right on their campus and integrated in with their curriculum. At Sierra College, we have a partnership with Hacker Lab in Midtown, and we also have partnerships with 2 other private makerspaces in Grass Valley and Truckee. And then Allen Hancock and Cabrillo have some really interesting partnerships. Allen Hancock has partnered up with the Public Library and the Exploratorium, and Cabrillo has partnered up with Goodwill Industries to help them on their work-based experience. And then there's just the private makerspaces that are out there that are really interesting as well. So I visited Noisebridge about a year ago in San Francisco, and I loved how it was this dirty, messy community space, but on the bookshelves were books about philosophy and religion and language. So I think we have a lot to learn from those spaces as well. Certainly we see that we are the passionate folks in the maker movement, see the connection between making and learning. In a college environment, you're limited, you're time limited, everything is time limited. So you're in a certain class with a certain professor at a certain time, and you only get to take that class once, either if you passed. And the makerspace really kind of blows that model open a little bit, where the student now gets to learn on a continual basis. There isn't anything limiting them. And it's also a mashup. An engineering student can mash up with a philosophy student. What does that look like when you provide that kind of learning environment? What does that do to your institution? What are the new types of partnerships and the new types of programs that are created when you have that mashup? We also have, for this particular project, because the community college system is so large in California, really ours is an opportunity of scale. There are over 2 million community college students in the state. We're hoping to affect a portion of those students certainly, and really our goal would be, just like our CSU colleagues, to see a makerspace at every community college. But for this project, our goal is to fund 800 internships, so those are students that have touched or been active with a makerspace, having an internship experience. It's important that faculty embed making into their curriculum, and that we connect with our ecosystem partners, and that also that we really think clearly about stackable credentials and multiple pathways that integrate making into academic coursework. So when we first started this, like I said, we're a year and a half into it right now, but when we first started, we thought, well, we had over 35 colleges that said, hey, we're interested in whatever this might be. So we thought, well, what the heck? Let's just start with the planning year. Let's see what happens when we bring everybody on board and we go through a guided process, and let's see kind of who wants to do this and who doesn't. And so we started out with 34 colleges in a guided process, a design thinking process. So that's about a third of the community colleges in the state. And they really had to go through kind of a pretty rigorous thing. They had to map their ecosystem of partners. They had to really do a self-study and develop a logic model. We did a boatload of webinars that we've archived on our website so that people can view them later. Colleges that completely, going back to that open source model, even though you're not a CCC Maker college, you can go onto our website and you can see all of the instruction that we gave to our startups so that you can use your team in your college to start your own movement. We had a lot of regional meetups and training sessions, and we did regional tours with each other. So again, building the community not only within a college, but within a region and within the state as well. So last May, we did a big convening at Maker Faire, or we actually did it at San Mateo College, and then everybody went over to Maker Faire. And we had 28 colleges that submitted plans for implementation. And out of those, we had a good broad group of readers, and 24 of those colleges were selected for continued implementation funding. So there are just, about, I'll tell you, about half of these had a makerspace, and about half didn't have a makerspace. So they're now just, about 7-8 months into really either building their space, wrapping up their project, getting going. So everybody turns in a quarterly report, and as of December, these were some of the numbers that were coming out. Just under 5,000 students had touched a makerspace. Mind you, not all the colleges have their spaces even up and running. So we're just getting started. But what's interesting is that those who did touch the makerspace, they spent about an average of about almost 6 hours in the makerspace. We had a lot of professional development for faculty, and we even had 2 student interns placed within 6 months while they're just getting up and running. So the type of work that the colleges are doing right now, there's a lot of enthusiasm, a lot of passion around what they're doing, and they're all quite different. So lessons learned for us. Really, first and foremost, and we say this all the time, the first is about building community. If you don't build your community both within your campus and then out to your outside partners, it's just not going to be as strong as a program. And really, the whole piece is, as my colleagues have also noted, this is really around developing a culture of problem finding and problem solving. And I'm really encouraging colleges to experiment. We don't do that well. We're bureaucracies. We're meant to be stable and not change. And the makerspaces help us move to where education really needs to go. And it also really allows us to kind of flip the model a little bit. So when we started, we say that we're very student-centered, but we really don't have students in positions of leadership or guidance. And I'll tell you, in our own college with our student team, they'd say things to us like, no, don't do that, that's really dumb. And it's like, oh, okay, all right, that's really great, thank you. Or they'd say things to us like, well, I'm just so surprised when you actually listen to what I'm saying. And so really, to have the students drive it and flip it, and now through our partnership with, at Sierra College, our partnership with Hacker Lab and our other spaces, the students are actually teaching. So they're actually teaching faculty and training faculty. So we've really flipped the model of learning, which is actually quite interesting. And as always, resources, when they're constrained, often gives you an advantage. So it's not a bad thing to not have a lot of stuff. A lot of colleges, Sac City College initially came and said, you know, we're really embarrassed, but like we only have like 100 square feet dedicated. It's like, no, that's great. Closet works, anything works. Just get moving, put the pedal down and go. And now, as at this point, Sac City has over 2,000 square feet dedicated to getting their makerspace up and running. So really, from us, from a statewide perspective, we've been looking at the bigger questions for us. Really what defines accessibility to a makerspace, and how can makerspaces reflect the diversity that our college campuses have in them. And traditionally, makerspaces aren't quite that diverse. And so this is a problem that we're talking about a lot and seeking innovative solutions with our cohort of colleges. We really want to explore the idea of what it means to be well-educated. And I think the makerspaces help us explore that question. Is it just what we learn in the classroom? Or is it what we also offer students outside the classroom in this mashup? And then really, you know, how do community colleges how do we become drivers of innovation in our own local economy? Most community college students live and work and want to stay in the community in which they are going to school. Many will transfer, many will not. So how do we grow our own local economy with our makerspace partnerships that are adding strength to those individuals? And then really, how do we create strong and adaptive and resilient makerspaces? This is a really experimental and moving target. The business model of makerspaces is all quite unique and different. They're going to morph quickly, and so how do we help them succeed in what they're doing? And really then, how do we really use the power of the ecosystem to make this project work? This is much more about expanding our own internal ecosystem of departments and programs and administrators down to faculty and staff. It's really about how do we really integrate partners in a really intentional way to add value to every student that comes onto our campus. I think that's all I have.
Thank you so much. And CCST has had the pleasure of working with Carol and other leaders in the CCC Maker Initiative, and has been able to see how much thought has gone into really developing the culture not only within each makerspace but throughout the entire network. So that's been really amazing to see that starting to come to fruition. And I will note too that when the original call for interest, when people were asking who's interested in this, over 60 colleges signed up from the community colleges to come to a series of symposia that CCST put on just to gauge interest. So before they knew how much work would be involved, at least half of the community colleges expressed real interest. So there's a lot of enthusiasm for this movement. So I just wanted to see if anybody in the audience has any questions for our panelists. Lisa?
This is a question from Mr. Ayala. On your maker certificate, that's just a certificate that you offer in your School of Education at Sonoma State, correct?
It's offered through the university, not through the School of Ed, so through our extended education program.
But that's not done in conjunction with CTC or anything like that?
No, it's not a credential, no.
And so, so as a current credential teacher that's out there teaching, they could come back if they wanted to and have the resources to take it.
Absolutely. The majority of the 400 folks who've gotten the Maker Certificate are sitting teachers. Yes, that's one interesting opportunity, right? The opportunity to think about the expectation within credentialing about the need for this kind of knowledge, right? We just went through a change in the expectations in the K-12 teaching credentials, and some new ideas were embedded in there. This might be something for us to consider for the next iteration, that credentialing programs provide this kind of exposure to all the teachers that the state produces.
And your hope is that other CSUs will provide something similar type of certificate?
Absolutely. So the reason why this initiative started catching fire was that I presented this to the California State Education Deans. We're a collaborative group of 22 folks. And several of the deans said, I want to do that too. And so the Monterey Bay Dean and the San Diego State Dean were the two deans that stepped up, got folks from their library and their schools, other schools, science and tech schools, to come together to request some resources to start makerspaces on their campuses. So this is the CSU education group is a very tight group, and this is a place where we can distribute knowledge. We're doing it with lots of things, but this is one of them.
Yes, Julie.
Hi, I've been working on a project looking at this advancement from scientific knowledge to, commercial viability of science ideas and technology. And I see the in my mind, I see the makerspaces as significantly contributing to at least narrowing that valley of death. I want to know if you are having any success partnering with manufacturing industry in the local regions to better utilize the technologies to scale, to at least test the scalability of some of these ideas. For example, you mentioned the professor from Berkeley, that you're only able to use you support small 3D printers, but for some of these ideas with grander ideas, I can imagine that might be beneficial.
Yeah, it's a good point, and we're actually starting very soon a course in our institute that is a field trip to local manufacturing operations. We'll also have a matching course that will take students internationally, because so many products are also need to tap into international logistics networks for making it onto the store shelf. The question, how do you take fundamental discoveries from a scientific lab or an engineering lab, and what's the sequence of steps that they turn into a successful business in California? It's quite interesting to me as well. I think one thing I've seen at UC Berkeley is that we get graduate students who show up in a makerspace because they're working on a fundamental enabling technology somewhere in their lab, and then the makerspace provides the additional ecosystem of less specialized tools that are generally involved in prototyping and checking the feasibility. And so I think that is very positive. There's then another gap from being a student in a makerspace who's successfully experimented with something to say, I'm now going to do this as a venture, and after I graduate. And so there, I think many universities are experimenting with these incubator, accelerator programs that let students stay on campus. For example, at UC Berkeley, that is the Citrus Foundry, among others. So the students can stay on campus. They can still use the makerspace even after they've incorporated. The UC system has ways to enable just students who've recently graduated to do that, to stay in the environment, but also make that transition to now we have to look externally for funding and settle on our business model and that whole cycle. So I think of it as there being multiple gaps that need to be bridged. One is a technology gap. We tend to do very well in makerspaces by taking technologies that you can already find off the shelf and building interesting systems with off-the-shelf technologies. But the technologies that come out of the lab are often not that ready at all, right? It's like one PhD student who got it to work. And so transitioning them to be able to use those technologies in a makerspace, I think, is one gap. And then the next one is from experimenting with something on campus to taking the plunge to do it as a company.
So I want to just add one thing from our point of view is slightly different is we have less technology transfer as the students that say, I have something that I think is a good idea, can I sell it, right? And then, so we have we've started an entrepreneurship course for those students, and we've started to develop the pathway. The sales pathway is very hard and tricky to take a product that a student developed in lab and get it to market. That's not an easy thing to do, both because of the rules and regulations and then the time frame. The student's only there for just a small amount of time, and the time it takes to get a product out is very lengthy. And I have an advisory board, and on that I have people that have done that. But we're not at that level yet. It would be great. I like the idea of makerspaces being that avenue to do that, and hopefully it will be more of that.
Well, my name is Alan. I'm a mechanical engineer, and I have a little bit of a lot of experience in manufacturing. I wanted to kind of piggyback off this question here, thinking about like the partnership with traditional manufacturers, and to be perfectly honest, based off of my experience, which is limited, I would expect that interaction to be a little bit hostile, actually, because if you think about what the maker movement represents, it's democratization and a spreading out of all these artisans and these crafts and skills. I don't know if you all work with manufacturers, but generally what a manufacturer does, at least in my understanding, is that you manage this skill and expertise to make this product and charge a lot for it because of that skill and expertise. Now when you have this maker movement where you're democratizing all this, you're doing cross-disciplinary stuff, I would expect a lot of people who make things for a living will view that as a threat and might not be well positioned to partner with that. And of course, I think is you adapt or die. But the question I'm asking after that long introduction is that have all of you seen any of that difficulty or the state of your partnerships with the industry? Because I believe that's an important thing personally. I think adapt should be replaced. But I do want to know if you guys have seen any difficulty in that area.
I'll get started on that. So one set of companies that are very eager to engage with makerspaces are the ones who make the digital fabrication machines, right? So Bantam tools, Type A machines. So many, so our circuit board mills are assembled in Berkeley, and we had the CEO of the company come to give a talk to the students about the process going from building that business. And similarly, we were some of the first customers for the rack of 3D printers, and there was a lot of back and forth with the company to learn from them, but they can also learn from our deployment. I don't have good anecdotes right on hand for the connection to manufacturing, but one thing I'll note is that a lot of the rapid prototyping tools do have their limits, particularly material selection. Right? So it's very easy to prototype the shape of something, and maybe even a functional mechanism for use as a prototype to show how something would work. But you wouldn't actually make the final product out of it because it'll disintegrate after a month or three. And so there might be an opportunity really for that makerspaces get more students interested in developing products and get the skill so that later on they know when it's time to talk to a manufacturer to say, okay, now can we make this out of steel so it's actually durable? Now can we make this at scale 10,000 instead of 3? And so there might be areas of competition, but I think there might also be areas where the makerspaces serve as a feeder of future customers to local manufacturing.
Another thing to think about, in my experience working with the local industries in our region, they look at the work that we're doing as a very valuable thing, because we are giving their future employees skills that they need employees to be able to do. We have somebody from Keysight, who is an instrument manufacturing firm nearby where we are. He participates in everything related to Maker. He probably knows Dale Daugherty's cell phone number, right? But he is there because he needs more technicians. He needs more people who will be able to run the machinery at his location. And he sees the Maker movement as providing the entrepreneur and the innovation piece, but also giving people skills that are necessary in these manufacturing places.
I want to echo what Carlos just said. I think it's really students that have a makerspace experience and join the community really come out and much more highly skilled, and they're actually much more valuable to manufacture than as a competitor. So our local, one of our local manufacturers, TSI Semiconductor, had one of our students as an intern this last summer, and Phil called me and said, I just got to tell you about the student. We had a problem that we talked about in the morning. Because he knew how to 3D print and prototype, he went and he developed a quick prototype, and I had a prototype in my hand to show my supervisor in the afternoon. Mm-hmm. And he was so incredibly blown away that a student would be able to give him that type of value add. He just couldn't believe it. So I think that's really the true power of the makerspaces.
Someone mentioned the middle skills gap, and certainly because of the digital revolution, that's becoming a global problem. I'm wondering if any of you are partnering with international makerspaces, either sharing information, lessons learned, or is there any models that have been compelling to you where you've incorporated maybe some of those practices into your own models?
Two or three of our college participants are Fab Labs, and they're part of the National International Fab Lab Network. Because we're not prescriptive in terms of what a makerspace has to be or act like. These were initiatives that started before us. And of course, the Fab Lab Network came out of the work of Neil Gershenfeld at MIT. And so they are connected into that network, and then we try and connect background as well. The international conference this coming July is going to be Paris. So we have several colleges that are going to be going.
Yeah, one thing I just want to point out that the ISAM conference, that's the International Symposium for Academic Makerspaces, and while it's certainly heavily focused on US makerspaces, there is international participation, and so attending that might be a good opportunity to see what other places are involved. There are labs from Europe there. One of the labs that has shown up for the last 2 years, actually very inspiring, is in Lahore, Pakistan, where the context is so different that people will take a half-day or day-long trip just to make it to that space, because the only space in the region, if not in the country. So I find having venues to find out about these alternate contexts where making happens is extremely inspiring and important.
The materials that you can work with the simple 3D printers are very limited. There certainly are 3D printers that produce quality products that are manufactured. Just look at your Adidas shoes, the top-line shoes today, which are produced by a 3D printing operation. The techniques that you're teaching, though, are giving these students a chance to learn how to design, learn how to prototype. Once they've developed that prototype, translating from a 3D printed part, using the same G code, going to a CNC machined part is not a big step. Is there any activity in that direction, expanding beyond? And I'm particularly interested at the community college level, because I saw in yours you have that. But at the community college level, is there an effort to go on to these other techniques that actually do lead to products that might be manufactured?
Yes, I'll just call out Alan back there. So Alan, I met at Hacker Lab, and Alan came and now teaches for us, and he teaches 3D printing, but Alan's an engineer. So Alan is that sweet spot of, well, okay, you're going to 3D print it, but you may not be able to manufacture it. And having that conversation with Alan, with students in the lab, is really critical. And I think that's the beautiful tension of having someone from the makerspace community who's out there, and Alan's worked out in industry as well. Having that practical experience come in has been invaluable.
We're not a community college, but at the CSU, we found that the materials that are available to print is rapidly increasing. So we have, for example, we bought a Markforged Mark II. It's about $15,000. It prints in nylon, reinforced fiberglass, all this. But now, that was 2 years ago. Now, for a TAS6, $3,000, you can print in nylon and polycarbonate, and it's only at like a fraction of the price. And so the materials are rapidly become available. Polyurethane, you can print it, it's almost rubber-like material, and all of this is with a $1,000 machine. And so, if they need it in metal, there's vendors on like Shapeways. If you want it in other materials, if you have the file, you send it to them, and they print it pretty cheap.
You can also take that design and do CNC machining on tools that are about the same price.
So a CNC mill, not the big ones, but the smaller one, a CNC carving is about $2,500. So the price has dropped even for, that's aluminum.
Yeah. Getting the steel is another matter.
That's another matter, but aluminum, $2,500.
I had a comment. Sorry. I'd actually say that when you're talking about transferring from one manufacturing method to another, context is very important, because a lot of times when we look at things and we think about like digital manufacturing, it's like it's all on the computer and things like that. But for the example that you just used, if you're going to take the G code and send it to a 3D printer, you actually use a completely different G code and a completely different process if you're going to CNC it. So actually that change, depending on what you're building, could be rather difficult. For example, if, one of the most popular things that we 3D printed is the DNA double helix model. So a DNA double helix, you have spherical lines going upwards, and then you have lines shooting across them. Now, if you're going to 3D print on a normal material extrusion printer, so you've seen like a MakerBot, Ultimaker, Lulzbot, stuff like that, because of how the 3D printer makes that thing, you can generally produce that in generally quick time. However, CNC machining that thing, injection molding that, is a completely different process. So there are some times when you're going from a 3D printed object to a manufactured object where it's going to be an easy transition. But on other times, it's going to be a completely different transition. Not taking away the value of the prototyping part of it, but that jump, that can be a hop, skip, or a gigantic chasm, depending on what it is you're building.
Yeah, I think it's, to me, the metaphor here is of a funnel. Like if we get many students exposed to just the possibility of turning their idea into a physical object, right? Then that's a base skill that many students, it just enlarges their toolbox of what they think is even possible. And then some subset of that students will probably become interested in, wait, if I actually wanted to go into business with that or work as a product design engineer in industry, then prototyping is just the start, and there's this whole pipeline that comes afterwards. And so, yeah, we're now developing the curriculum around product development, right? What do those next stages look like? What do you need to know about different manufacturing processes? What do you need to know about logistics, et cetera? But that becomes I think, a more focused skill set for a more prescribed set of careers where the basic exposure to making skills is beneficial in quite a wide variety of careers, even if you don't become someone who creates products for a living.
I like that metaphor of the funnel. We should make one in a 3D printer. But so one thing I want us to pay attention to, we're missing some people from this tape. We don't have anybody from the K-12 here. And I don't, this may have been just a higher ed focus, but I you know, when you started talking about the funnel, I see that funnel starting in 3rd and 4th grade. You know, let's get young women in 3rd and 4th grade interested in these kind of things, and then the population that we see going to the community college, CSU, UC line is going to be different. And we really need a champion here in the state capitol who is going to kind of push this forward for us, and so that's why we're here today.
I was just about to ask you. Does anybody else have a final question?
Is there a article or book or video or website that you could recommend to get oriented into what this is all about, banking and so on is all about?
Yeah, actually, if you give me your name, I will send you Dale Daugherty's book, and it gives you a nice history of making and the direction that at least he sees as one of the models for how to spread this, and that's a really good place to start. I go back and look at that all the time because I think the definition of making changes so much. It's a great place to start. It just came out a couple of years ago. I'll take your card and I'll mail it to you.
Okay, so we just have a minute or two left, and I just wanted to ask you all, because you're in growing networks, you're just starting out, you have a newer makerspace, although you have a lot of experience on your campus with other ones. What do you think, if you could have anything on your wish list that would help your program or your space operate at its most optimal level? What could you use? You've already started talking about support in a more networked fashion, but that would be.
Yeah, I think one of the interesting things that I discover when I talk about these makerspaces or innovation centers is how few people know what they are and what they do. And so one thing I think that would be very important is to raise the level of conversation about these and talk about all of the different areas of potential that they have. We've talked about a lot of different things here. And so having a champion here in the state capitol who understands the value of this and sees that potential, it gives me goosebumps to think about having 8,000, 9,000 K-12 teachers with kind of maker experiences and then creating maker spaces in elementary schools, high schools, community colleges, CSU. That's going to be hugely powerful. The level of creativity that comes out of California is powerful in itself, and if we had this as a tool and we had a champion here, I think that we could see more amazing things come out of the state.
I think we're at this interesting inflection point where the first couple of spaces were all grassroots, bottom-up efforts, and now we're trying to grapple as individual universities or as university systems and how to also support it from the top down. And I'd like us to think about what would it take for every first-year college student in the state of California to have a making experience, right? What is the physical infrastructure? What's the expertise, and at what scale would we need that to actually allow everyone, not just the students who are already motivated to seek out these spaces, to open their eyes to the possibilities that making can bring to them?
I think they got it. Yeah, someone to champion to get out the word and to help us as we sort through what are the pros and cons, and then how to take the best and spread it across all of California, and then getting it in at that freshman or sophomore year, right at the beginning for the students. It really changes their trajectory, not only for their time, for their degree, but all their future career. And so both of those are extremely powerful and useful from my point.
I think from a leadership perspective, having college presidents and superintendents understand the value of what making is and the value that it has on a college campus is incredibly important. Oftentimes you might walk into a makerspace and think, oh, you know, this just looks like a place to play. But it's incredibly powerful what's happening in makerspaces, and that's why it's so incredibly important that that research comes out of the impact of makerspaces, continues to grow, and inform our leadership on the value of makerspaces and the power that it brings not only to the student, but to the institution and the community.
So thank you everybody for sticking around. This was really fun, and all of our panelists are going to be at the reception tonight, so if you have more in-depth questions, maybe corner them after they've gotten some food and then, and we hope to see you all there. Thank you.